Welcome to Power Talks with Santosh Shah. Today we have with us Ms. Daisy DELL, the representative of UNHCR to Nepal. At any given time, one or other part of the world is facing humanitarian crisis due to conflict, civil war, military attacks, or natural disasters of several kinds. Whatever it is, a large number of populations are displaced or forced to migrate from their homelands and seek refuge somewhere else. UNHCR played an instrumental role in Sri Lanka's recovery from tsunami disaster. Post Sri Lanka's war against LTTE, how is UNHCR preparing to help the large number of internally displaced civilians?
Indeed, you're right that UNHCR contributed to the recovery after the tsunami, but UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, has been in Sri Lanka since a long time. We opened an office there in the late 80s, and we've been helping with displaced populations ever since. And the most recent displacement that we've been witnessing, UNHCR has been helping the government in actually assisting the refugees, the displaced populations, in some 40 sites, I think all over northern and eastern Sri Lanka, and it's about 300,000 people that are there. The main focus of our work has been in trying to enlarge the place where the people are, sort of having more land available, decongest the places, providing assistance, and also focusing on the most vulnerable people, the women, the children, those that got separated during the flight from their families, making sure that these people sort of are reunited. And we're working with the government now on more freedom of movement. We hope that these people will be able to return very quickly to their initial villages, and we'll be working with the communities to rebuild the houses and make sure that the communities can return to where they come from.
In a similar fashion, Pakistan government had to deal strongly against the Taliban terrorists who occupied Swat Valley. As a result, Swat Valley's migration is the largest one after the 1947 partition. Is there any plan for UNHCR to take the supports to Swat Valley as well?
UNHCR has been very active in Pakistan for many years because, as you know, there's been a large population of Afghan refugees, but more recently was the earthquake. UNHCR has been helping the government. And we've now witnessed one of the greatest population displacements of modern times, as you've said. There's about 2 million people now who are displaced within Pakistan. Pakistan is displaced within Pakistan. It's about 1.5 million of the recent displacement and 500,000 of earlier displacement already some months back. So about 2 million people are in need of assistance. And over 160,000 people are now living in camps, while the rest are staying with host families, with friends, or in public buildings, in schools, in different locations. But this population is increasing every day because those who initially helped them, sort of by giving them shelter in their homes, cannot sustain that either because they themselves are affected. So UNHCR has been very active in trying to work with the government. We have had a presence there for a long time, as I've said, with a big presence. But it is very difficult also, the situation, because it's such a large movement that has happened in such a short time to address all of the needs of these people. The climate's not helping. It's extremely hot, so people who are staying in camps, we need to address, so their needs for water, additional water, but also shade, sort of some privacy. And we have brought in a lot of new UNHCR staff to help. We work with partners, with other UN agencies. There's also a security element. As you may know, the UNHCR head of office of Quetta was abducted at the beginning of the year in January and released in April. And we unfortunately have lost a colleague from the emergency team in the blast that happened at the hotel in Peshawar on Tuesday night. So security itself kind of makes it at times very difficult for us to deploy as many staff as we would need. Resources is obviously another issue, and we are sort of appealing for funds, to deal with this massive displacement. The High Commissioner himself came to Pakistan mid-May to look at the situation and to raise awareness and to raise funds.
Recently, UNHCR succeeded in distributing some 110,000 identity cards to Sudanese refugees in Chad. It took Darfur a long time to receive global attention and then the humanitarian aid. Why did it take such a long time in Darfur's case?
You're right. There's ongoing distribution of identity cards to the refugees, the Sudanese refugees in Chad. UNHCR is assisting these people and protecting them in refugee camps. It is much more complicated inside Darfur because inside Darfur, these people are not refugees. They have not crossed the border yet, so their status, or they haven't crossed the border, maybe they will not. Their status is not refugees. Their status is internally displaced. And the Sudanese government did not recognize that UNHCR had a role to play with these people. They consider they come under the protection of the Sudanese government. But UNHCR has been able to find a way to work in Darfur together with other agencies, because we have some refugee camps there of Chadian refugees who've crossed the border into Sudan. And looking after these refugees, we've been able to open offices and provide assistance to an increasing number of internally displaced, as these people are called. Unfortunately, developments as of late have not been very favorable because, as you know, Sudan has asked a lot of international organizations, NGOs, non-governmental organizations to leave the country. And they were partners of UNHCR. They were helping us to provide assistance to these populations. And now there's much more of a skeleton staff that's left behind, and it's much more difficult to do the implementation of assistance. We have 5 full-fledged offices in Darfur and 2 presences as well. But it is more difficult, and a lot of the women and children in particular sort of are living in very, very difficult, very fragile conditions, and we are not reaching them, and it's very difficult for us to address their needs.
In South Asia, especially in Nepal and in India, the issue of Tibetan refugee is a significant one. How has UNHCR recognized the status of Tibetan refugees?
UNHCR does recognize that Tibetan refugees may be in need of international protection. Most Tibetan refugees have found protection either in India or in Nepal, and those governments do recognize some of their rights. Nepal is hosting some 20,000 Tibetan refugees, and all of those who have arrived here before the cutoff date of 1989 have actually been recognized officially by the government as refugees. In India, India continues to give status to the Tibetan refugees and recognizes their right. So UNHCR only intervenes in those cases where people have not found protection.
During the Taliban regime, Afghans took refuge in Pakistan and India and other parts of the world. Now that Afghanistan has a better socio-economic and political environment, has there been any success story?
The Afghan refugee population has been one of the largest in the world. In the late 90s, there were some 5 million Afghan refugees, mainly in Pakistan and in Iran. And since 2002, over 4 million have returned with the assistance of UNHCR back to Afghanistan.
That's a great success story.
It's a great success story, but it does remain quite fragile because many people do get reintegration assistance when they come back, and that helps them. But in order to kind of rebuild their lives, they need more assistance than that. And Afghanistan still needs a lot of support from the international community. Repatriation is voluntary, so only those who wish to go are going back. Return must be voluntary. It's important that people have a free choice. Pakistan has just extended the deadline for Afghan refugees to stay in Pakistan from 2009 to 2012 to give people the opportunity to choose that. It is a very large population movement. I mean, it added to the 2 million Pakistanis that are now displaced and 1.7 million Afghans. It's a large population movement. UNHCR is helping all these displaced populations with the government, and we have been doing so in the past. We've been helping local hosting populations that have been hosting the refugees. We've been helping during the earthquake, and we will continue to help, considering the conditions, and as difficult as they are, to reach the refugees and the displaced persons in need.
We'll continue with our conversation after a short break. Do stay with us.
Please don't turn away. Refugees are the most vulnerable people on earth. Every day, they are fighting to survive. They deserve our respect. Please do not forget them. Remember them on this day, World Refugee Day.